Welcome to Muskies Canada at Work, a virtual odyssey. I am seeing a lot of familiar faces here. Gentlemen, welcome, and please be ready to tell us some awesome stuff. I want to hear about Sudbury. Take it away, guys.
Hi, everybody. Jacques, Sudbury Chapter Chair. Thanks for joining us. We're proud to have with us today Arunas Liskauskas, OMNRF, Upper Great Lakes Management Unit, who's going to share some pretty interesting details on the Spanish River Muskellunge Restoration Project. We're really anxious to hear about that and what the potential fishery might be like. But first, we're going to have a discussion with Jeff Amos, OMNRF Northeast Region Resource Advisory Unit, and Andy Pappas, MCI Director, Hall of Fame, and Guide, about the efforts towards changing the season and minimum size limits for the Ontario, mostly towards the Lake Nipissing and French River. For that, a special mention needs to go out to two of our members, Brian Trotter and Jason Grisdale, who did a lot of work with the SMC committees. We didn't have a whole lot going on in the north, but they represented us very well and the work they did there. So with that said, if you're thinking of joining, now's the time. COVID put a damper on our meetings last year, so we're moving towards virtual meetings, which will help us bring in members from across the north. We're based in Sudbury, but we have people from as far south as Parry Sound and as far north as Sault Ste. Marie. So now's the time to join. We got a lot of guys with boats, a lot of guys without boats, and we live in a shift work town, so we're always looking for people to fish with. So whether you're a seasoned vet or you're new, you got a lot of good people in this group to grow with. So with that said, I'm going to pass it off to Jeff and Andy, and be sure to keep your questions at the end. We're going to have a little short 10-minute Q&A session. So over to Jeff and Andy.
Thanks, Jacques.
Thanks, Jacques. I'm sharing my screen. Can folks, oh, there we go. It's flashing on my end, but can...
Yeah, me too. It's like a strobe.
It's slowing down. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'll try sharing again, and hopefully that fixes the problem. That looks better. Okay, thanks everybody. My name is Jeff Amos, and I'm a fisheries specialist with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry here in Northeastern Ontario. I'm actually sitting in Timmins. It's a nice sunny day in Timmins today. The ice is just coming off the lake, so I might be able to get my boat out in the next week or so. But anyways, today I wanted to talk about managing both for sustainability and for quality in muskie fisheries here in the northeast of Ontario. Been working with Muskies Canada for a few years now. We've been collaborating to manage muskie fisheries here in the northeast. So first, let's just start with a bit of geography here. Where is Northeast Region? So Northeast Region, the Northeast Region of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry encompasses FMZs 1, 3, 7, 8, 10, and 11. So it's a big piece of real estate. No real muskie fisheries to speak of in FMZs 1, 3, 7, or 8. Although muskie populations do exist in Lake Superior, which is FMZ 9. No real fisheries to speak of in neighboring FMZ 7. However, significant populations, I think as most of us are aware, significant populations of muskie are present in zones 10 and 11, primarily in the southern part of both of those zones. And actually they support some world-class muskie fisheries. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom into FMZ 10 and 11, and we're going to talk about some recent management actions, proposals that were brought to the MNR by Muskies Canada. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about how fisheries are managed in the province, generally speaking. So in the province of Ontario, we work with advisory councils. Just about all of our fishery management zones have an advisory council established, and those advisory councils are made up of a broad range of interest groups, including Muskies Canada, local rod and gun clubs, typically tourism outfitters. OFAH is typically at the table, and often Métis and First Nation communities are also at the table. The MNR works with the advisory councils to develop fishery management objectives, and these are typically developed at the species level. We're developing management objectives for species across the zone, and we work with the advisory council to write a fishery management zone plan for that zone, and obviously throughout that process, our advisory councils, as their name indicates, provide us with a lot of advice about how we should be managing fisheries, what some of the issues are, and those sorts of things. And as far as Muskies Canada goes, it's been a great model working with Muskies Canada and them bringing proposals to the advisory council table, discussing those types of things at the advisory council table. I just wanted to pass things to Andy real quickly here. Andy, if you wanted to speak a little bit maybe about your experience in working with the advisory council.
Sure. Yeah, I think if viewers didn't know before this day and a half that we've just had of discussing muskies and Muskies Canada at work, if you didn't know before, improving muskie fisheries doesn't just happen. It takes planning and effort, and Muskies Canada has been involved with that now, with trying to make muskie fisheries better for decades now. In the Northeast region, it's been about 30 years that Muskies Canada has been influencing muskie management. So we started back in 1992 with discussions to increase the French River minimum size limit at that time from 34 inches to 48 inches, and that was for the French River itself, and then subsequently that 48-inch minimum size limit went into effect in I believe 1995, and then subsequently that was applied to the Upper French River and Lake Nipissing as well. So then the next involvement I'll say was in 2011. There was a proposal that we put together, partially because Muskies Canada members from the area were noticing that in early springs, muskies were still spawning in June sometimes when the season was opening in the first weekend in June, and there were a couple guys from Sudbury chapter that had said they'd had muskies drop eggs in their boat and things like that. So the proposal was really around trying to introduce a consistent season for the region, starting the third weekend in June, as well as moving the minimum size limit up, not just for the French River and Nipissing, but more widely. In 2015 to 2021, Muskies Canada got involved in the FMZ councils that Jeff was just speaking about, and so we've been represented on the FMZ 10 council from 2015 until now. We've been participating there. Jacques mentioned Ryan Trotter. I want to thank him as well. It's for again, it's effort, and for someone like Ryan to take these meetings are happening on work days typically, and guys have to take time off to. And Ryan's met me several times in places like Espanola or North Bay to attend these council meetings, and I really appreciate that help. So the proposals, there's been several proposals involving muskies in FMZ 10, and Jeff is going to give you more details about how those are advancing.
Yeah, that's right.
In just a couple of minutes. I also wanted to mention that Jeff sort of mentioned Lake Superior having muskies as well, and Jason Grisdale from Sudbury chapter has been involved and participating in the FMZ 9 council there from 2017 until now, and has been representing Muskies Canada trying to get a higher minimum size limit there. The Lake Superior, a great lake with some muskies in it, and currently has a minimum size limit of 36 inches. Now in 2019, when when the Fisheries Management Zone 11 Fisheries Management Plan was posted and went into public consultation, Muskies Canada submitted a proposal to increase the minimum size limit for Lake Nipissing yet again. And Jeff will also be providing a little more information on where that's at. All to say, if you're interested in finding out more about how Muskies Canada participates in FMZ councils around Ontario, you can reach out to me directly, and I'll give you more information about what's going on in your area.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so like Andy said, I'm going to talk a little bit about those proposals, those past proposals and some current proposals. But before I get into that, I just wanted to quickly remind folks about how, the framework that we use for managing muskies in Ontario. As we heard the minister describe in his opening remarks, and as Dan and Davin did such a great job yesterday during the afternoon session, describing the framework where we use growth potential of populations for management of muskie. And here on this figure, the blue dots on this figure are real data. These are real length at age data for a muskie population, and they're superimposed over top of John Castleman's length at age trajectories that we use for growth potential. And with this population, those blue dots, you can clearly see that that this population is on that upper 99% confident limit in terms of growth, and would be a population that would support going to a 54-inch minimum. The population, basically, it has the growth potential to reach those large sizes, and this would be an example where we would put that 54-inch minimum size limit, or we would be considering putting it in place. So now I just want to give a couple of examples. Andy touched on these a little bit, and I'm going to touch on them a little bit more. But two recent examples of working with Muskies Canada in both zones 10 and zone 11. The one Andy mentioned was the French River season change, and that was brought to us a number of years ago. And like Andy said, angler reports indicated that muskie in the French were spawning in early June, and that the opening date on the French should be aligned with the rest of the zone, which is actually the third Saturday in June, not the first Saturday in June. So that was brought to the advisory council. The advisory council was very supportive. We then went to public and Indigenous consultation phase of that proposal. The vast majority of comments that we heard during that public consultation were also very supportive, and that change was implemented I think that change was implemented January 1st, 2020. The second example here was a proposal, again, brought to the Zone 10 Advisory Council table by Andy and the Sudbury chapter, to increase the minimum size limit zone-wide, so that is for all of Fishery Management Zone 10, to increase it to 48 inches. And in this case, this speaks to the value of the data that come out of the Angler Diary program. Muskies Canada came prepared with that proposal, with data to justify the proposal. And here in the bottom figure, you can see through these data are perhaps in a little bit of a different format than folks would be used to seeing them. I've just put them into a different format here. But this shows the largest muskie caught by year by Muskies Canada members, and we can see that in more than half of the years since about 95 up to 2019, the largest fish caught and recorded exceeded 48 inches. So clearly, again, justifying going to that 48-inch minimum size limit zone-wide. Again, we went through the same process in this case. It was brought to the advisory council. The council was supportive. We then went to broader public and Indigenous consultation. That was supported as well. And the change was implemented January 1st, 2020, again, in this case. The next two examples I want to talk about are much more recent. And in fact, they're both still in the proposal stage. The first one on the top here, like Andy alluded to as well, Muskies Canada brought a proposal to the Lake Nipissing Advisory Council. We have a separate advisory council specific just to Lake Nipissing. And that proposal was to increase the minimum size limit on Lake Nipissing to 54 inches. In this case, we had data from Muskies Canada, the angler diary program, but we also had our own data from index netting surveys on Lake Nipissing. And in both cases, the data demonstrate that muskie do indeed grow to and exceed 54 inches in Lake Nipissing. We brought this to the advisory council. They were supportive, and we're currently doing public and Indigenous consultation on this. So the link on your screen here will bring you to a page on ontario.ca where the proposal is there, along with proposals for other species on Lake Nipissing where we're considering regulation changes. And folks can read the proposal and the rationale behind the proposal, and it will tell you where you can submit your comments. So anybody interested in Lake Nipissing and what changes are being proposed there, please visit that page on ontario.ca and send us your comments. We definitely want to hear them. The last example here is a proposal again brought by Muskies Canada to the FMZ 10 Advisory Council, this time to increase the minimum size limit on several Great Lakes tributaries, and again increase it to 54-inch minimum size limit. So folks would know that in FMZ 14, which is the north shore of Georgian Bay there, the minimum size limit currently is 54 inches. However, as we talked about on the last slide, in FMZ 10, so the waters of FMZ 10, the minimum size limit is 48 inches. Several of these populations, so the French River, the Mississauga, the Goulet, that are flowing into the Great Lakes, both data from Muskies Canada, but also data that I think Arunas is going to be showing us in the next presentation. The data demonstrate that, again, these populations migrating between the Great Lakes and inland up to some of these tributaries support that they have that growth potential to support 54-inch minimum size limit. So this will be part of our Zone 10 management plan, which will be going out to broader public consultation within the next year. This change, assuming everything goes forward, we'd be looking at implementing this probably in 2023. Finally, I just wanted to highlight the importance of data here. I think it's pretty obvious throughout my presentation that the data coming from the Angler Diary program is really invaluable. In Ontario, we have a provincial monitoring program, a fisheries monitoring program. Each of these blue dots on the map of Ontario is a lake monitored by that program, but it really doesn't do very well describing muskie populations. These populations typically occurring at low densities, and when we do capture them in our index nets, they typically destroy the net and escape anyway. So we don't get very good quality muskie data from that program, and we really heavily rely on data coming out of the Angler Diary program to make management decisions. It's a really critical piece of that management decision-making process. So I want to thank all the Muskies Canada members for contributing to those data sets, because they're extremely helpful. And that's it for me.
We love to hear that, actually, and that's a really important point that I'd like to encourage our members. If you're not currently filling out logs when you're going angling, you've seen now that the information from them is actually used for something, and it's considered in making management decisions. So if you're a current member, it only takes a minute per day and you could even do it on your phone. It's that easy to fill out a log. If you're a new MCI member, maybe you just joined during this Odyssey event, get a hold of your chapter chair from the chapter that you've joined, and they'll direct you as to how to start submitting logs. And if you're not a Muskies Canada member and you're viewing this event, this is just one more reason to join Muskies Canada, is that you're going to be able to be part of this process to manage fisheries better.
Thanks for that, Andy. That's it for me. I just wanted to conclude here by saying what a fantastic the job you guys have all done organizing this. It's incredible. I've been following sort of in and out over the last day and a half, and we talk about establishing and supporting world-class muskie fisheries here in Ontario. I think this event over the last day and a half is something that's world-class as well. So good job everybody involved in pulling this together. It's been really awesome. Pass over to you, Arunas.
Thank you, Jeff. I just wanted to start out by saying thank you for the invitation to communicate a story to the virtual Muskie Odyssey. And this is going to be a good news story. And hopefully it'll be providing you with some interesting insights as to what we've seen on the Spanish River. So it's a story about an unfortunate loss, but an optimistic comeback of the noble Muscellunge into the Spanish River and Delta area of the North Channel of Lake Huron. And I just wanted to start out by briefly mentioning my credentials. I've been with the Upper Great Lakes Management Unit for close to 30 years now. And over that time, I've had the privilege, and I can say honor, to work on Muskellunge and try to understand the populations that inhabit Eastern Georgian Bay in the North Channel. And in spite of being here for 30 years, I still feel like I've just scratched the surface of understanding. This species of fish lends itself to a lot of mystery. And even in the science realm, it still presents a lot of challenges. But let's move on from my profile and let's talk about the Spanish River Delta. So this slide just gives you an indication of where the Spanish River is situated. I'm going to be focusing my presentation on the lower Spanish. So the section of river that's below Espanola, and that represents about 52 kilometers of river, and it flows out into the Delta area and the Whalesback Channel. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's in the North Channel of Lake Huron, a large watershed, and the first impassable barrier is the dam and falls at Espanola. So I don't have a lot of time to talk about the history of this population, but I'll just give you a brief background. So in the late 1800s and by up to the 1950s, this area supported commercial and recreational fisheries for Muskellunge, which is quite surprising. You don't often hear about commercial harvest of Muskellunge, but certainly there was substantial commercial harvest in this general area. And that activity occurred up until the 1950s when this population was extirpated. And it was a combination of that exploitation as well as rapid decline in habitat quality. There was a pulp mill situated in Espanola, which discharged a lot of pulp effluent. There were log drives that occurred in the river up until the late 1960s. There were depositions from the Sudbury smelting activity. So a lot of industrial assaults on the river, which basically reduced water quality and destroyed much of the coastal wetland habitat that was a critical feature for successful natural reproduction of Muskellunge. So I'm going to just highlight some of the keys to restoration, and I'm going to focus particularly on one aspect of the restoration process. So one of the keys was to repair damaged habitat. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that. There's quite a long history related to habitat. I should mention that the area, the Spanish River and Delta area, was designated as an area of concern in the 1980s related to a number of impaired uses in the area. So that kind of started the process of trying to restore habitats in the river. Restricting exploitation was also critical in trying to restore Muskellunge to this area. The fishery has been closed since the mid-1990s, so it's been about 25 years since the fishery for Muscellunge has been closed in the Spanish River. Community outreach, critical in communicating the plight of Muscellunge in this area, and I'll highlight that briefly in my next slide. Rehabilitative stocking of Muscellunge was also a critical feature trying to restore Muscellunge into the Spanish River area. And time for recovery. Muskellunge are a long-lived species, and they are relatively older when they reach maturity, so it takes some time for them to be able to restore their populations through natural reproduction. So time is going to be a key feature when we talk about why this particular effort to restore Muskellunge was successful. So as I mentioned, I'm going to focus primarily on the rehabilitative stocking phase or facet of this restoration effort. So partnerships were key in gaining the attention of the public, gaining resources, both financial and people power, to enable us to try to embark on this restoration initiative. And the Friends of the Spanish were quite instrumental in, I guess, highlighting the plight of Muskellunge. They felt strongly that the Spanish River ecosystem and fish community could not be considered healthy or complete without an apex predator like the Muskellunge, particularly when that species was quite robust and abundant historically. And you can see that Muskies Canada was also a critical partner in investing both monetary resources and member support for this initiative. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the study area. So actually the timing for this restoration initiative was quite timely in that the Upper Great Lakes Management Unit was just embarking on an effort to try to establish the status of Muskellunge populations throughout Eastern Georgian Bay and the North Channel. You can see in this map, it depicts the distribution of muskie populations throughout Lake Huron, and it actually represents probably the largest contiguous distribution of Muskellunge within the Great Lakes. And I've highlighted a few areas in which we were doing some targeted trap netting for spawning Muskellunge: Severn Sound, Moon River, Shawniga, Strawberry Channel area. And I'm going to highlight the fact that this shoreline area represents close to 400 kilometers as the raven flies, a very complex habitat that's critical for the support of Muskellunge populations. And I wanted to highlight the brood sources, the wild brood sources that were used for gamete collections for the restoration initiative for the Spanish River: the Magnetawan River, French River, McGregor Bay, Bay of Islands, and Serpent Harbor areas. All were used to collect gametes for rehabilitative stocking in the Spanish River area. So let's look at the egg collections. For those of you who are involved with wild egg takes, they are very complicated, very difficult. Trying to encounter Muskellunge is very difficult in the first place, and trying to encounter mature females and males at the same time is even more difficult. But with 8 successful egg collections from 1996 to 2003, we were able to secure a good genetic representation of wild brood stocks for the restoration efforts in the Spanish River. Many Muskies Canada members came out on some of these early trap net surveys. We encountered over 300 adult Muskellunge, many of which exceeded 54 inches in size and greater than 50 pounds in weight. This is really the first effort to try to get an insight into the status of Muskellunge populations in this area. All Muskellunge were sampled and tagged with external tags, T-bar tags. Gametes from about 100 fish representing the 5 donor stocks were collected in total. So good broad genetic representation from the 5 brood sources used. And tissue samples were collected from each individual that was sampled for subsequent genetic analysis, which I will expand upon later on in the presentation. So how did everything go? Well, we had 8 successful years of stocking, but it was difficult. And I should mention that at the outset, the target was for 2,000 fall fingerlings per year for an 8-year period. And we didn't quite reach that, that mark. However, over time, the fish culture techniques were developed and improved upon, so much so that in some years we exceeded that 2,000 target, particularly in 1998, 2000, and 2003. 1 year from the Bay of Islands, the other McGregor Bay, and 1 year from the Magnetawan River. So in total, close to 9,000 fall fingerlings were stocked and 1,360 spring yearlings. So over a 9-year period, we had muskellunge stocked into the Spanish River system, something that did not happen for over 50 years, since 1950, when that population was extirpated. So how do you monitor the survival of these fish, and how do you get a handle on how muskellunge are doing in a river ecosystem such as the Spanish? It's a very difficult system to monitor and assess. Very high flow rates, murky water, and it's very difficult to try to find the appropriate technique for assessing this particular species. What turned out to be one of the best approaches was late summer electrofishing in the river proper. And the reason why this technique was so good was because flows had diminished by that time, water clarity had improved, and the young of the year and juvenile muskellunge tend to be situated close to the perimeters of the river channel and accessible and quite visible. So this was a technique that was used to assess the status of muskellunge in the Spanish River. You can see that in 2004, the electrofishing in the river successfully captured some young of the year muskellunge. In 2005, the electrofishing continued with an increasing catch rate and increasing number of young of the year captured. And 5 years later, in 2010, with the electrofishing approach, even the catch rate increased even further, indicating that muskellunge were successfully reproducing in the Spanish River for the first time in many decades. So very positive signs of natural reproduction occurring, suggesting that the habitat had improved to the point where it could support natural reproduction. This is just a slide showing the distribution of young of the year captured during the electrofishing surveys. And you can see that the spawning, the successful spawning, wasn't just restricted to the Delta area where there's a lot of coastal wetlands and prime spawning habitat. We captured young of the year throughout the river system, all the way up to Webwood, and in good numbers. So this suggested that muskellunge were successfully reproducing through a very large part of the river. These young of the year do not move very far from the area in which they hatched. So they must be close to nursery habitats. So this was a good sign that there was good reproductive habitat through a large part of the river. We also wanted to find out whether there were a lot of adults in the population. There must have been, in order to generate these recruits. We had some funding in 2011 to conduct some spawning surveys using trap nets. And of course, with best laid plans, we had a historically high flow year in 2011 in the Spanish. Very cold, very high flow year that spring. In spite of that obstacle, we were still able to capture adult muskellunge and juvenile muskellunge in our survey. We captured a total of 11 muskie, 5 were adults, 1 female. The one you see in that picture was 49 inches in total length, 6 juveniles, 1 recap muskellunge. And I should mention that in 2004 and 2005, trap net efforts targeting the spawning period were conducted, but did not capture any muskellunge. So they were still found in very low numbers. And fortunately, we were able to confirm that, in fact, there were adult muskellunge in the Spanish River Delta area. Just wanted to show you where these adults were captured, primarily in the Delta area. This one particular individual, that 49-inch female, was recaptured 2 weeks after our spawning survey was completed by anglers targeting northern pike. So that was the first evidence that we had that these large fish were moving upriver, probably seeking appropriate spawning habitat. So I'll just put a plug out there for probably this area would be a good candidate site for some acoustic telemetry to find out where these fish are moving and what areas are they selecting for spawning habitat, because that's a big unknown at this point. We don't know exactly where they are spawning. We were able to secure some additional funding 5 years subsequent to those surveys. And in 2016 and 17, we kind of piggybacked on some targeted netting for walleye. Our unit had some funding to target the spawning walleye run in the Spanish. And we were able to get some additional funding to see whether there were any additional signs that Muscellunge were recovering in the Spanish River system. And as you can see by that individual there, we were quite pleased by the results that we experienced. So we were using our trap netting survey in the Delta area. The bottom map shows you the location of our netting sites. And you can see that although the absolute numbers weren't very high, we were encountering Muskellunge, adult Muskellunge in the lower Spanish. And we were also capturing some juveniles just below Espanola. In 2017, our capture rate for adults was much lower in the Delta, but we were able to encounter some large Muskellunge through the electrofishing survey that was targeting spawning walleye. So we encountered some very large Muskellunge in the upper part of the river. 17 females in total, the largest being just over 53 inches, 12 males, 3 unknowns. And although the catch rates of adults using this standardized methodology targeting adult spawning Muskellunge was relatively low to other locations that we've used this technique or this netting approach, it's just possibly a reflection of the difficulty of sampling the Spanish River because of its high flows and just the nature of the habitat itself. A lot of it isn't very accessible with our traditional 6-foot trap nets. But in some years, like in 2016, our catch rates were comparable to what we've seen in other locations. So we've confirmed that adults are present in this population. And in terms of their size characteristics, they're very comparable to what we see in the other locations that we've sampled in Eastern Georgian Bay and the North Channel. I've highlighted that 50-inch line on this plot. This plot shows the average size of male and female Muskellunge in the areas that we've sampled, and it also shows the maximum size of females and the maximum size of males. As you can see here, the green bar is the maximum size of females. So in all the locations that we've sampled, including the Spanish River, our females are well above 50 inches. We get maximum size females that all top that 50-inch magic mark, so to speak. I wanted to briefly talk about genetics, and I don't want you to all get glossy-eyed over this, but it's an important insight into the characteristics of the Muskellunge populations in Georgian Bay. I should highlight the fact that Dr. Chris Wilson from our ministry has been doing a number of studies in the area, and we did publish a paper that showed that each of these locations that we've sampled, although the locations are rather arbitrary, each of those areas has a very unique genetic fingerprint. So all those populations, as depicted in this graph showing the various locations, Serpent River, Bay of Islands, McGregor Bay, the colors indicate the genetic characteristics of that population within the area. If the colors are different, that means those populations are quite distinct. The take-home message from this slide is that each of the populations that we sampled in Eastern Georgian Bay and the North Channel were very distinct, very unique. These fish are are homebodies. They don't move distances and intermingle with adjacent populations. So their genetic profile is very distinct based upon area. This is just a genetic relatedness graph or plot, and it shows that the Spanish River and the Serpent River fish seem to be closely related, which makes some sense in that the Serpent River is probably the closest naturally reproducing population to the Spanish in that general area. And you can see that there's a cluster of populations that are closely related in the North Channel. Less related are the Moon River, Gloucester Pool, and Severn Sound. And much further related are the Kawartha Lakes, which are quite distinct from the Georgian Bay populations. And this, which is my second last slide, this is a slide that shows how interesting the genetic storyline is for the Spanish River. I wanted to point out that on the left side of this plot are the brood sources that were used for restocking the Spanish River. McGregor Bay, Bay of Islands, Serpent River, French River, and Magnetawan River. All distinct. And this first part of the right part of the slide shows the young of the year genetic profile in 2005. You can see that the color is distinct from all these brood sources, which suggests that there must have been a remnant population of Spanish River muskellunge that held on, because they are distinct from even the Serpent River, which is closely related. And what else I wanted to point out here is that the young of the year in 2010 and in 2011 are showing many more colors, which are the colors that are present in the profiles of the broodstock populations. So it seems that in recent years, there's evidence that those stocked fish, those brood sources that were used to stock the Spanish River, are contributing to either young of the year production or adults in the recovering population of the Spanish River. So it means that the rehabilitative stocking has been successful in contributing to the current population in the Spanish. So in conclusion, we have evidence of multiple natural year classes since 2004. Adult abundance remains low, but it's likely a reflection of how difficult it is to encounter these fish using our typical survey methodologies. We've encountered individuals from Espanola all the way downstream. We have evidence that one of those clipped fish, each of the fish that were stocked were clipped. We found a clipped fish in 2016, which was a relatively large, mature female, suggesting that there has been survival of these stocked fish into the system. And the genetic analysis shows that there likely was a remnant population of muskie that persisted, and that there's evidence of donor stock influence, especially from the Serpent Harbor. I just wanted to end by acknowledging all the technical staff and the IT staff that were involved in this major undertaking. You can see that a lot of people contributed to the success of the Spanish River muskellunge reintroduction. And with that, I'll stop with my impact slide, and hopefully I have not gone over my time too much.
You got 2 minutes. So there's a good question here. On average, how many eggs will a mature female drop, and what's the approximate mortality rate of those eggs?
Good question. Let me just see. I've tried to stop sharing my presentation here.
We're good. We don't have anything else but you on the screen there now.
Okay, good. How many eggs does a large female deposit, and what's the survival rate? Well, if you get a large female, something on the order of 40 to 50 pounds, you're talking on the order of 30 to 40,000 eggs. And the survival rate is very, very low. It's a fraction of a percentage. And there are a lot of things that either predate upon the eggs. The microhabitat in the area where the eggs are deposited fluctuates and varies in terms of oxygen content and water quality. So these eggs are actually quite vulnerable because mature muskellunge are, the females anyways, are broadcast spawners. So they don't afford any adult protection to the eggs. They find appropriate spawning habitat and they deposit the eggs, and hopefully they do their thing. They incubate and develop without all getting predated or not having enough oxygen to develop. So it's a very precarious existence for muskellunge, even though they're a large fish and they can put out a lot of eggs.
Andy, a question for you. There was a question asking, what's the best information and what information do you want to see in the logs? for those that haven't participated yet?
Well, when you get to the members area, so it sounds like it might be a new member, to the members only area of the Muskies Canada website, there are fields to populate with information. And so to generate information about the size structure of a muskie population, of course, it's important that you're putting in the lengths of the muskies that you're catching. In terms of you're going to want to put in, it's very important that you put in entries even for days that you catch no muskies, because measuring the hours per muskies caught can tell us a little about whether the population is increasing or decreasing. So go to the members only area of the website. The form is there, and it's asking for information like that. But those are two of the main things: size of fish, number of hours that you're putting in per day.
Good afternoon, team. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Great. I see that there was a bunch of comments that came through for you guys. So I was super interested in the auctions that are going on the other side. So I didn't get to catch a lot of what you said, but anytime guys like you are up here sharing information, I'm going to certainly enjoy watching it back. So we are 2:46 and we are right on time. I want to thank you guys for joining us and let you know we really appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody.
All right.